For this next segment, I'm going to be talking about Joe Biden. I guess the Trump-Biden transition, and but more so, I'm going to be focusing on his announcement of his foreign policy team that I found interesting. So, yeah. So while the mainstream media are focusing their intrepid journalism skills into dissecting what type of hair dye Rudy Giuliani's using and exactly what drugs Sidney Powell is on, they're deciding to overlook Biden's foreign policy picks and their fuckery in favor of fawning over them for the sake of diversity. I'd say it's a diversion tactic. However, given the Glenn Greenwald story I recently read about how Obama was used to shore up European and American support for continued military ops in Iraq and Afghanistan, I wholeheartedly believe the mainstream media is fawning over these fucking diverse war criminals. It's genuine, unfortunately. Although not officially confirmed yet, like Biden hasn't come out and she hasn't like gone on the stage like everybody else has. But Michele Flournoy is his presumptive pick for SecDef, in which she'd be the first woman in that role. Yay. Her colored history in the corrupt practice of influence peddling, veiled by the word salad of consulting, should be called into question, however. I find it disconcerting that after leaving office as Undersecretary of SecDef in February of 2012, less than 6 months later, she takes a consulting gig with Boston Consulting Group, whose defense contracts grew from 1.6 million to 32 million in 2016 when she joined as their senior advisor. Another coinky dink is that according to public records, Boston Consulting Group hadn't landed any contracts with the Defense Department prior to the undersecretary's arrival to the company. She went on to become CEO for the Center for a New American Security in 2014, which is a quote nonpartisan think tank dedicated to developing strong, pragmatic, and principled national security policies, which is code word for bombing the fuck out of Muslim countries and usurping them of their natural resources. That's what that means. Defense contractors donated at least 3.8 million of the think tank's $9 million budget. So if you believe her influence from serving as deputy SecDef had nothing to do with her scoring these defense contracts and contributions, then I got a bridge to sell you. She even considered serving as deputy secretary of defense under Jim Mattis, but declined. I guess it's hard to turn down the $452,000 she was raking in per year from her consulting gigs, which she referred to as a labor of love. In Flournoy's mind, building bridges between Silicon Valley, and this is what she's saying, and this is a quote: building bridges between Silicon Valley and the United States government is really, really important, especially if we want to continue using big tech to censor journalists, persecute dissenters of the status quo, and further invade and strip American citizens of their rights and privacy. And this woman's bullshit is somehow framed as better than Trump because she has a vagina. Now, the two guys who were quoted in this American Prospect article, I'm citing everything from. Their names are Aguirre and Chada, I believe. They approached Flournoy with the idea of her own startup. However, she wanted another big name because when it comes to bombing Muslim countries, you should never do it alone. But this is a quote straight from the article. Intrigued by Aguirre and Chada's idea of starting her own shop, she had one condition: find another big name so it just wouldn't be Flournoy and Associates. They needed another co-founder. Establishing a new firm was a risky investment, and many Obama officials were already spoken for, serving other fucking technocracy companies. Some headhunted by corporations or consultancies, others returning to academic appointments or finding respite in research institutions, many wearing all those hats at once. Flournoy could carry her own private practice, but she didn't want a firm with her name on it alone. The trio reached out to defense and intelligence honchos with no luck. Then a particular Washington fixture came to light. He had been Vice President Joe Biden's right-hand man for almost 2 decades and finished out the Obama admin as Deputy Secretary of State. He was known for his unimpeachable ethics. Having written Biden's speeches for years, he had started to enunciate with the vice president's drawl when he appeared on CNN. He had never cashed in on his international connections. Years of FaceTime with Saudi, Israeli, and Chinese leaders. His name was Tony Blinken. With his commitment to join Flournoy as a founding partner, a new strategic consultancy was born. They called it West Advisors. and this is more straight from the article. Um, Westec promised to be more boutique than conventional consultancies like Albright Stonebridge Group or Rice Hadley Gates. I believe that's Condoleezza Rice's firm. Most clients would have direct access to either Blinken or Flournoy. They also recruited an assortment of former colleagues as contractors to chip in because the consulting gigs are just so ripe out there. Among them, Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Work, Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro, and Deputy CIA Director Avril Haines, who will also be coming up later in this segment, who had helped design Obama's program of using drones for extrajudicial killings. Now they needed clients. Their first step was hosting a party. At their April 2018 launch, Aguirre and Chada stood with drinks across the hall from Westec's now furnished suite. It had a clubby feel thanks to purple lights and concrete walls. It must have been heartening to look across the room at Susan Rice, Tom Donnellan, and Dennis McDonough eating canapes as a DJ spun. I don't even know what the fuck that shit is. To look more established, Westec found partners in a private equity group and a Google affiliate. The private equity firm Pine Island Capital Partners was incorporated a year earlier by John Thane. Blinken and Flournoy joined a startlingly high-profile roster of policymakers, including 4 retired senators and a former chair of Joint Chiefs. Pine Island declined to comment, of course. Thane, an investment banker, had tanked Merrill Lynch, sold it off to Bank of America, and paid himself several bonuses along the way. At the height of the subprime mess, he spent $1.2 million remodeling his office while millions of Americans were struggling, millions evicted and foreclosed in their homes. This motherfucker spent $1.2 million remodeling his office and installing a $35,000 golden toilet. Just in case you didn't think he was an asshole by spending $1.2 million remodeling his office, he wanted to throw the $35,000 golden toilet in there just to make sure you knew he was an asshole. Because every once in a while, this guy could be an asshole, but on a very good day, he could be a real dick. He seemed like a less than ideal partner for public servants. Oh, really? Oh, really? Another partnership was with Google's in-house think tank, Jigsaw. West execs Robert Work, during his time at the Pentagon, collaborated with the tech company in an artificial intelligence venture, as first reported by The Intercept. That AI initiative, known as Project Maven, led to an insurrection among Google staff upset about collaborating with the military. In case you haven't know, you've been collaborating with the military forever and the intelligence apparatus and community forever. West exec has done no work on Project Maven, period, said Flournoy, which I don't believe a fucking word she says. Though Jigsaw has since been removed from West exec's list of partners, the prospect has learned that Blinken and Flournoy have continued to work quietly and informally with Google engineers and executives, spitballing potential geopolitical threats. Schmidt features Google founder and billionaire Eric Schmidt Philanthropy has also hired West exec. The founders told executives they would share their passion for helping new companies navigate the complex bureaucracy of winning Pentagon contracts. They told giant defense contractors how to explain cutting-edge technology to visitors from Congress. Their approach worked, and clients began to sign up. Once one was an airline, another a global transportation company, a third, a company that makes drones that can almost instantly scan an entire building's interior. West exec would only divulge that it began working with Fortune 100 types, including large U.S. tech, financial services, including global asset managers, aerospace and defense, emerging U.S. tech, and nonprofits. The prospect can confirm that with one of those clients is the Israeli artificial intelligence company Windward. With surveillance software that tracks ships in real time, 2 former Israeli naval intelligence officers established the company in 2010. Gabi Ashkenazi, former chief of staff to the Israeli Defense Forces, serves on its board. Windward also claims former CIA director David Petraeus as an investor as well as a Hong Kong billionaire. Who is that Hong Kong billionaire? I'm about to open that. I'm just curious to see who it is. Li Ka-shing. Horizon Ventures, a venture capital funded by Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing, said Tuesday. I guess they're not showing a picture, but a Hong Kong billionaire. Most U.S. military tech companies avoid money from China, experts told me, so they turn to investing in Israel. But China's the big, the big bad people we're supposed to be afraid of. Strategic consultants behind the scenes work in world capitals can look a lot like lobbying, because that's exactly what the fuck it is. West Exec says they do not lobby. We'll tell you who to go talk to, but we're not going to go in there for you, and we're not going to facilitate the introduction. I don't believe that, said one staffer. One of their offerings that attracted corporations, the same staffer told me, is an on-call National Security Council. It wasn't until companies renewed contracts in December 2018 that Aguirre and Chowder felt that their strategic consultancy was in place. The plan was paying off. West Exec didn't need to do any marketing. CEOs had recommended them to other CEOs. And this is just like, it's just very telling about the type of swamp. Like, this isn't draining the swamp, and no, Biden didn't run on draining the swamp. He ran on back to normal. But you just see the type of people that even these are the types of people Trump's people were still interacting with. So you see the the swamp will never be drained like they say it will. So it's just it's just weird. So I'm just gonna. It's not weird. It's sickening, really. It's sickening. It leaves me without words on how deep the corruption runs in DC. Because just when you think you have it all figured out, like, oh, DC corrupt, it's just a whole new fucking layer that literally, like I said at the top of this, like less than a year from leaving office, she joins this consulting firm, basically cashing in on her influence, which is ridiculous. Last year, West Exec's corporate interest in their policy making at last, and this is the part I wanted to get to especially, collided. On January 7th, 2019, Tony Blinken and Michele Flournoy chaired the biannual meeting of the liberal organization Foreign Policy for America. Over 50 representatives of national security groups gathered in a boardroom at the Madison Hotel in Washington. Blinken and Flournoy's roles with West Exec were not listed on the invitation or on the FP4A website. The group worked through 24 agenda items, and the last one was the war with Yemen. Many Obama diplomats had expressed remorse for enabling Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's destructive campaign in the Arab world's poorest country. In 2015, Obama had dispatched Blinken to tell Mohammed bin Salman that the U.S. supported Saudi Arabia's right to defend itself and nothing more. But 4 years later, the U.S., through its armed sales, was party to an ongoing war, and what they don't say in this article is genocide. The death toll was over 100,000 in an asymmetric conflict, and a defense contractor, Raytheon, has sold Saudi Arabia more than $3 billion worth of bombs. 4 hours into the marathon policy discussion, many former officials joined progressive advocates in urging an end to weapon sales. The starting point per FP4A's agenda was to ask Congress to halt U.S. military involvement in the conflict. Most participants supported cutting all weapon sales, but one person stood apart. Who was that? Michele Flournoy tried to persuade the group that an outright ban on arms sales to Saudi Arabia wouldn't be a good idea, because, it's never a good idea to stop a genocide from going on. Putting conditions on their use was a better compromise. Why are we compromising on genocide? But this is her idea. One that defense contractors wouldn't lobby against. According to two attendees, Flournoy told me she had made a distinction between offensive and defensive weapons, saying that Saudi Arabia needed advanced Patriot missiles to protect themselves. Protect themselves from what? They're literally creating or they're committing a genocide. And you want to find a compromise? This is the problem with these types of people. They're going to put their moneyed interest over what's best for the country and overall what's best for the world. And it's like, it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. And it's disgusting. But these are the people that are, just because she has a vagina, she's better than Trump. Um, it was an argument she had been making around the Capitol, but it didn't resonate among the left leaning room, and it probably wouldn't like resonate with anybody with a conscience, and didn't affect the group's recommendation. The two people present, it sounded like Flournoy, to two people present, it sounded like Flournoy was working for Raytheon, which produces Patriot missiles. Flournoy would not confirm whether West Exec currently works for them. Raytheon was not being considered as a client at that point. She said, "When I take a policy position, I do so because I think it is in U.S. interest. No, it's in your fucking pocket's interest. And the views I express are solely my own, no one else's. Yeah, fuck off. I don't believe you." Another West Exec staffer wouldn't comment on whether the consultancy has Raytheon as a client, but would only say the defense contractor is in the ballpark, which means, yeah, they're a fucking client. Noting they work for a defense prime, meaning one of the top 5 defense firms, among which Raytheon ranks. So as you can see, like these people are just horrible people, and it's like, it's not about them just being horrible. Like that should count, but just from an economic standpoint, they're war hawks. They're for these expensive, endless wars that do nothing for the American people here at home. And it's like I feel like if most people knew what a lot the war crimes a lot of these people Biden picked, that we're tied to, especially when it comes to liberals who claim that they're supposed to be against war. Like, I don't call myself a liberal. I'm a person that's against war. It's like you're literally voting for the biggest war hawks out there, like Joe Biden, one of the biggest war hawks out there. But just look at his net like the next person I want to talk about now that he chose as his national intelligence director, Avril Haines. Avril Haines, she was the architect of Obama's drone program that killed 90% innocent civilians. And Obama and Haynes' defense is at least we reformed it, right? Like, no, it's not. That's not okay. And, these drone wars, like Obama dropped more bombs than Bush over his term. And it's like this woman right here, she was the architect of that, and she's somehow supposed to be better than Trump. By the way, to you vote blue no matter who, like, Democrat or die people out there, she served under both the Bush and Obama administrations. She's deep state as fuck. And it's like, people think the deep state, again, I talk about this all the time. People think the deep state is, the conservative right wing conspiracy. No, deep state is literally just these unelected fucking leeches that stick around through, from administration to administration, and are the architects of some of the most horrible shit. People in the intelligence community, people in the fucking defense department, like all these fucking pieces, warmongering pieces of shit that just stick around that aren't elected in there. And it's like the New York Times, this New York Times article that I found about her is very interesting. Because it says a lot. Like it really says a lot. Like, and I'm looking at it right now, but again, they stick to this shit that doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, man. And this is the type of shit they say. It's clear that she has eccentric interest. They're talking about all this bullshit. And this is just a little bit of her history. In the Obama White House, Miss Haynes was a national security legal advisor, beginning in 2010, a position that helps oversees covert CIA programs, including the drone strikes and classified Pentagon operations. She then served as a deputy CIA director from 2013 to 2015, after which she returned to the White House as the deputy national security advisor, leading the committee of agency deputies that develop policy options for Mr. Obama in the final years of his administration. Early in her government career, Ms. Haynes developed a reputation for her intellect and for starting work early in the day and continuing late into the night, with only a small break for her husband to deliver dinner. And they try to humanize these people by bringing up stuff like that. A close study of Ms. Haynes' life might not suggest that she was bound for the top intelligence job. She attended the University of Chicago as an undergraduate, studying physics and working as an auto mechanic. Again, I said, her hobbies are admittedly cool. She seems like a cool person until you realize, she's a warmongering piece of shit that works for the CIA. She also began taking flying lessons from an instructor she would later marry, David DeViggy. A profile of Miss Haynes in Newsweek in 2013 described how Miss Haynes and Mr. DeViggy bought a twin-engine plane and began rebuilding it with the hopes of flying it from Maine to England. They made it as far as Atlantic Canada when the engines gave out, forcing an emergency landing in Labrador. And this is some fucking white people shit, bro. I'm sorry. This is some white people shit. You don't hear about niggas doing this, bro. Not even like, yo, you really don't. Yo, like, this is some shit I want to do, but I'm kind of a white black dude. People like make fun of me all the time for having white people interests. I got white people interests, but you don't hear about broke people doing this shit, dog. She's some rich white chick. Yo, broke ass people don't got time for this shit. And so she's unrelatable to the people just after reading that. After graduating from college, Miss Haynes moved with Mr. DeViggy to Baltimore, where they eventually bought a bar that had been seized by the government in a drug raid and remade into an independent bookstore and cafe. Years later, when Miss Haynes was named a deputy director of the CIA, Washington journalists had fun reporting on the occasional sexy time erotic literature nights the bookstore hosted in the mid-19th. See, just bullshit. In one session attended by a Baltimore Sun reporter, Miss Haynes kicked off the reading with an Anne Rice fairy tale, then gave the reporter a spirited defense of the spontaneity, twists and turns of erotic fiction. Yeah, this is a woman who ran torture programs, and honestly, I'd be worried if I was her husband, because her idea of spicing up their sex life would be hooking his balls up to a fucking car battery while she pours cold water over his nipples. His safe word for those nights is probably Obama. Like, yo, like, again, just bullshit. Now, reading that, this is what I'm about to tell you right now. These are just a couple notes I picked out from other articles as well. But this chick, she expressed support for Trump's CIA pick Gina Haspel, who's known for the torture program she ran. Also, it said this, I believe it's from this New York Times article as well. Haynes will have to rebuild an intelligence community that was openly excoriated by President Trump over its assessment that Russia had interfered on his behalf in the 2016 election. What they mean by that is she will have to rebuild an intelligence community that got caught openly lying and pushing propaganda, which they've been doing for decades. And the media, including the fucking New York Times, willingly peddled that propaganda to its audience. Like, Shorty even helped cover up the CIA's hacking of the Senate Intelligence Committee's network while the committee was investigating the CIA's cover-up of government-ordered torture programs. That's so many cover-ups. It's like a cover-up within a cover-up, covered up by a cover-up. Inception-level cover-ups, if you ask me. I wonder if the CIA has realized they cover up so much shit that we see right through them. Like, and the mainstream media just downplays all this woman's fuckery with the identity politics card. Same thing that was done with Flournoy as I covered earlier. It's just, you know, it's just ridiculous. This isn't change. This isn't bringing change to America like Biden's saying he's doing. And which leads me into talking about this Tony Blinken guy. And I'm just going to read this article very quickly and go into a couple other like tweets I found interesting too. But what do you need to know about Tony Blinken? Biden's apparent choice for Secretary of State most recently played the influence game in Washington. This guy, Jonathan Geyer, too, he's really good. He writes for the American Prospect, so I definitely recommend checking his work out. And definitely the American Prospect, they do very, very good work. For nearly 2 decades, Tony Blinken has served as President-elect Joe Biden's closest foreign policy advisor, from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to the Obama White House. That Biden would choose him for a high-ranking position in this administration was never in doubt. On Sunday, we learned what the position would be: Secretary of State. Blinken is already being greeted by soft profiles focusing on his diplomatic career, his youthful days spent in Europe, and his love of guitar. But for a better sense of how he might actually craft foreign policy, it is essential to look at his recent work as a strategic consultant, a brand of Washington influence peddling that has gotten little scrutiny. And that's kind of what I was talking about with Michele Flournoy earlier. Strategic consultants draw upon their contacts and knowledge of Washington to advise powerful corporations. They do everything but lobby. This summer, I interviewed 60 Washington insiders as I investigated how Blinken's firm parlays connections into profit. Ooh, I'm actually going to read myself. Oh, that was from the article. Okay. Okay, that was the article I read. Sorry, guys. But when I see something interesting, I like to like open it and save it for later. That's just how I am. I always have like 100 tabs open. The Biden transition team would like you to overlook Blinken's corporate career, but it's crucial to understand the most recent resume item of America's top diplomat. After serving Obama, he cashed in. Blinken launched West Exec, which I talked about earlier, with fellow Obama national security chiefs in 2018. West Exec's very name, a reference to the avenue that runs along the White House, suggested that its founders were trading off of their recent experience in the Oval Office and were angling for positions in the next administration. Blinken became a partner at a private equity firm named Pine Island too. It was quite a change for someone who spent most of his career in government and has served most recently as Vice President Biden's National Security Advisor from 2009 to 2013 and as Deputy Secretary of State from 2015 to 2017. He and Michele Flournoy, that's what I was talking about earlier, former senior defense official, registered the firm in Delaware. I did not know that. I live in Delaware, and had a party to open their downtown DC office suite with honchos from the Obama administration. Oh, okay. So a lot of companies register in Delaware for tax reasons and everything. Delaware is basically a tax haven. Joe Biden is thanks to that. So, who was the firm advising? West Exec staffers cited non-disclosure agreements and declined to name clients, but in conversations with members of the firm, I learned that Blinken and Flournoy used their networks to build a large client base at the intersection of tech and defense. An Israeli surveillance startup turned to them. So did a major U.S. defense company. Google billionaire Eric Schmidt and Fortune 100 companies went to them too. We are driven by helping companies who think they have a cool commercial capability and think that there's a market for it in the federal space, one West Exec employee told me. I found a lack of transparency troubling. One key thing to watch for is which clients Blinken will reveal in financial disclosures and Senate confirmation hearings. Blinken knew his gig at West Exec would be temporary. Indeed, he was so confident that the firm arranged for an exceptional contingency in his lease that allowed it to be terminated without a penalty if a Democrat won the White House. Flournoy is now a top contender for Secretary of Defense, and several other West Exec staffers are likely to hold key roles in the administration. The firm's strategic planning has paid off. He'll push Biden toward the middle, which we don't need. Biden will become president at the time of a pandemic, an economic crisis, and a crisis of American leadership. With Blinken as Secretary of State, we're likely to see a return to an old guard of Democratic foreign policy. Blinken has a quite cautious, don't rock the boat approach. One of his former colleagues told me, but we're not at a risk-averse moment in our history. It's time for bold ideas. That Blinken took a leading role in guiding Biden's mistaken approaches to Iraq does not bode well for a long overdue withdrawal of America from conflicts in the Middle East. Another issue is that Blinken seems to be more comfortable working with neoconservatives than with progressives. When the Biden campaign attacked Women's March organizer Linda Sarsour in a call this summer, activists raised concerns. The campaign walked it back, and Blinken later apologized to the Muslim and Arab American community. While some progressive foreign policy experts have supported the Blinken pick, the Biden team only listens to progressives on foreign policy when they make noise, which they don't listen to them at all. 3, he's going to be powerful because there is no Biden doctrine. As Senator and Vice President, Biden's only consistent approach to the world has been an emphasis on personal relationships, especially with foreign leaders. This malleable worldview has given the national security establishment influence in advancing their own agendas within Biden's team. And it also means that key advisors have an outsized role in decision making. So basically, since Joe Biden has fucking dementia, all these fucking ghouls and goblins are going to be running the ship, which is basically what they're saying. Blinken recently offered a glimpse of Biden's approach to statecraft on a CBS podcast. There is over-reliance on the military tool and an under-reliance on, for example, on diplomacy. And that would change in a Biden administration, Blinken said. The podcast was sponsored by a major weapons maker at Lockheed Martin. Your mission is ours, read an announcer. The tagline threw everything Blinken had said into question. It makes it even more glaring that the paper of record notes on A1 that Blinken plays in a band, but neglects to mention his recent work for corporate and defense clients. So basically, that whole article is about that motherfucker being corrupt as shit. And, just a couple tweets. Like, I know Danny Highfon, I don't know if you guys know, he writes for the Black Agenda, I believe. This is what he had to say about it. Biden has named Tony Blinken his Secretary of State. Blinken was key to shoring up Democrat support for the Iraq invasion and instrumental in U.S. role in regime change wars in Ukraine, Libya, and Syria. We are back to smart wars, and they are no less deadly. So this is also Ben Norton. Biden's Secretary of State is now official. Liberal war hawk Tony Blinken. He supported the 2011 war that destroyed Libya and unleashed slave markets, along with Neertanden as well. Defended Israel's massacres in Gaza, started a catastrophic war on Yemen, and is a neoliberal at a private equity firm. And he had a whole. I'd recommend go check it out his Twitter to read that whole thread. But this thread was more interesting to me. Oh, this thing's been playing. I'm gonna get back to that. But this clip summarizes Joe Biden's Secretary of State nominee, Anthony Blinken. Let me go back here and make sure the desktop audio is playing. It is live. I guess it is, but I'm just gonna play the clip for you. Check it out.
To China are trying to autocracies from Russia to China are trying to exploit that, to add fuel to our own troubles. And so at the very moment that democracies most need leadership, and I would argue leadership from the United States, playing the role that it's played before as the leader of the free world, unfortunately, we have a president who, by embracing autocrats and dismissing Democrats, seems to many to have suited up for the other autocracy.
So that's basically him saying, we need to return to being the world's, the leader of the free world, which I don't get how we can do that when we're still bombing the shit out of 7 countries right now, even while we're going through a pandemic and we have food lines in our own country. But it basically points out, like as Ben Norton says here, the U.S. empire is the leader of the free world, and boogeymen like Russia and China are the enemies of freedom. And this is basically pushing more Cold War bullshit. Biden's Secretary of State nominee, Anthony Blinken, called for strengthening the U.S.-led imperial military cartel, NATO, which destroyed Yugoslavia and Libya, insisting that re-evaluating these alliances, starting with NATO, is going to be very, very important to a Biden administration. Anthony Blinken is a hardcore new Cold Warrior. In this interview, Blinken quotes infamous Cold War warrior George Kennan, the architect of the U.S. containment policy, condescendingly portraying Russia as backward, neurotic, and expansionist. All projection. That is all projection. Here's Biden's Secretary of State nominee, Anthony Blinken, endorsing the bellicose ideology of Cold War architect George Kennan, portraying Russia, even after restored capitalism, as an invariable enemy of the U.S. empire that must be contained. The new Cold War goes on. This is going to be interesting. I didn't see this one.
The whole point of Kennan was that the problem here is not that they're communists, but that they're Russian. Is the thing that we really have to come to grips with. And I have to say it's also very discouraging for a writer on foreign affairs to realize that the most profound essay maybe in the 20th century in America could be so universally misunderstood and misapplied. You wonder sometimes why you get up in the morning.
Well, some things are truly evergreen, and this really is one of them. And it's why, and I'm glad
So this is, man. As part of its new Cold War strategy, the Biden admin is going to greenwash U.S. imperialism. Here, Secretary of State nominee Anthony Blinken makes it clear Washington is going to cynically use climate change rhetoric to attack China's global belt and road infrastructure project. And I'm just going to read the part he highlighted. One, for example, would involve working to insist that China, which is the world's largest emitter of carbon, stop subsidizing coal exports and outsourcing pollution to other countries by financing billions of dollars worth of dirty fossil fuel energy projects through the Belt and Road Initiative. So basically, they don't want China forming like alliances with other countries the way we did post World War II with a lot of the European destroyed European countries and other countries around the world. So it's just very hypocritical. As you can see, this guy Anthony Blinken had a hand in everything from the Iraq War all the way to the genocide in Yemen. And honestly, I found this trying to let me find the article. Because they were talking about Joe Biden. Yeah, in the article I pulled up, they were talking about how, Joe Biden's like, how he decides to handle foreign issues, which is basically giving it to his team to do it, which I found interesting. So I'm just going to read this paragraph. The Obama campaign in 2008 made a pledge to exclude lobbyists from policy deliberations and once in office policymaking. Lobbyists are not bad people, then Senator Joe Biden said. Special interest groups are not bad people, but they are corrosive. They're bad people, Joe. Biden was the most modest vice president in recent history, coming into office with a net worth of less than $150,000. But afterward, he made big money, profiting from a multi-million-dollar book deal and earning $540,000 annually from a University of Pennsylvania center named for him that doesn't involve any teaching. He nevertheless promoted himself as middle class Joe. I work for you, not any industry. Yeah, you're a fucking liar. But many of the people who work closely with Biden are enmeshed in the opaque world of strategic consultancies and, by extension, a network of the world's biggest businesses. If they've been consulting for corporations with offshore interests, this spells potential conflicts. One of the biggest gaps in ethics laws is that we don't require strategic consultants to register as lobbyists, which they fucking should, said Mandy Smithberger of the Project on Government Oversight. When it comes to foreign affairs, Biden and his advisors are non-ideological and mainly transactional. In Obama's Situation Room, he sometimes urged restraint, according to people who were there, and sometimes were hawkish rather than being associated with a particular school of stagecraft or a signature policy accomplishment. Biden is known for his intimacy with world leaders. Tasked by Obama to end the Iraq War, Biden supported Nouri al-Maliki, the world leader he knew, and rescued the Iraqi prime minister's career, even though it ended up fracturing the country. When Maliki narrowly lost in 2010, Biden didn't give Iraqi political parties time to broker a new coalition. With Biden's endorsement, Maliki gained a second term. He grew more authoritarian, which is now widely believed to have led to the rise of ISIS. Biden ignored experts who were skeptical of Maliki and preferred to glad hand. He came to deal with Iraqi politicians like local political kingpins in Delaware or Pennsylvania, said Robert Ford, who was deputy ambassador in Baghdad from 2008 to 2010. Biden's foreign policy is a blank slate on which often conflicted advisors from the national security establishment will project actual policies. There is no Biden doctrine. He's not a guy who knows history. He's not a guy who is intellectually curious, said Emma Skye, who advised the United States military in Iraq. It's all about personal relationships. Those close bonds may cloud his judgment. He expressed love for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a literal piece of shit, even after he defied the Obama administration and stood by the late Egyptian president Hosni Mubarak as he assaulted protesters. In effect, Biden's foreign policy is a blank slate onto which often conflicted advisors from traditional national security establishment will project actual policies. If personnel is policy, as Elizabeth Warren likes to say, we can learn a lot about Biden from his team. In addition to Blinken, advisors include Nicholas Burns, Kurt Campbell, the Cohen Group, Kurt Campbell, the Asia Group, Tom Donilon, BlackRock Investment Institute, Wendy Sherman, Albright Stonebridge Group, Julianne Smith, West Exec Advisors, and Jake Sullivan, Macro Advisory Partners. They rarely discuss their connections to corporate power, defense contractors, private equity, and hedge funds, let alone disclose them. I asked a Biden spokesman, and this quote hit me the most. I asked a Biden spokesperson if the campaign would commit to more transparency and expand the Obama era pledge to strategic consultants. There's a difference between consulting and lobbying, he told me. There's a pretty strong line there. So presumably we don't have a ban on people who are consultants at one time or another, since I'm one myself. And that is why they're not going to ban consultants. So just to close out this segment, these are the same ghouls and goblins that, had a hand in the Obama administration and all of the war crimes committed then. And the war crimes are going to continue. And as I'm going to cover in the next episode on Monday, with a lot of his economic choices and his domestic policy choices, it's not going to get any better there. Like I mentioned, Neera Tanden, he chose her for a position in his cabinet, which again I'm going to talk about on Monday. So the war machine is going to continue. The war machine is not stopping, and liberals don't care about that. All liberals care about is like whether it's a woman or a gay person or a black man that's in charge, and that's all they care about. And so they could go to sleep and feel comfortable, and that they have a president who isn't an asshole and tweets all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and close it out there, and I'm going to be moving on to the next segment.